David Warren Brubeck, born December 6, 1920, December 5, 2012, was an American jazz pianist and composer. Often regarded as a foremost exponent of cool jazz, Brubeck's work is characterized by unusual time signatures in superimposing contrasting rhythms, meters, and tonalities, and combining different styles and genres, such as classical, jazz, and blues.
Born in Concord, California, Brubeck was drafted into the US Army, but was spared from combat service when a Red Cross show he had played at became a hit. Within the US Army, Brubeck formed one of the first racially diverse bands.
In 1951, he formed the Dave Brubeck Quartet, which kept its name despite shifting personnel. The most successful and prolific lineup of the quartet was the one between 1958 and 1967. This lineup, in addition to Brubeck, featured saxophonist Paul Desmond, bassist Eugene Wright, and drummer Joe Morello.
The U.S. Department of State sponsored tour in 1958 featuring the band inspired several of Brubeck's subsequent albums, most notably the 1959 album Time Out. Despite its esoteric theme and contrarian time signatures, Time Out became Brubeck's highest-selling album and the first jazz album to sell over 1 million copies.
The lead single from the album, Take 5, a tune written by Desmond in 5/4 time, similarly became the highest-selling jazz single of all time. The quartet followed up Time Out with 4 other albums in non-standard time signatures, and some of the other songs from this series became hits as well, including Blue Rondo a la Turk in 9/8 and Unsquare Dance in 7/4. Brubeck continued releasing music until his death in 2012. Brubeck's style ranged from refined to bombastic, reflecting both his mother's classical training and his own improvisational skills. He expressed elements of atonality and fugue. Brubeck, with Desmond, used elements of West Coast jazz near the height of its popularity, combining them with the unorthodox time signatures seen in Time Out.
Like many of his contemporaries, Brubeck played into the style of the French composer Darius Milhaud, especially his earlier works, including Serenade Suite and Playland at the Beach. Brubeck's fusion of classical music and jazz came to be known as third stream, although Brubeck's use of third stream would antedate the coining of the term. John Fordham of The Guardian commented, Brubeck's real achievement was to blend European compositional ideas, very demanding rhythmic structures, jazz song forms, and improvisation in expressive and accessible ways.
Brubeck was the recipient of several music awards and honors throughout his lifetime. In 1996, Brubeck received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2008, Brubeck was inducted into the California Hall of Fame, and a year later he was given an honorary Doctor of Music degree from Berklee College of Music. Brubeck's 1959 album Time Out was added to the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2005. Noted as one of jazz's first pop stars by the Los Angeles Times, Brubeck rejected his fame and felt uncomfortable with Time, featuring him on the cover before Duke Ellington.
Ancestry and early life. Brubeck had paternal Swiss ancestry. The family surname was originally Broadbeck, and his maternal grandparents were English and German. He was born on December 6, 1920, in Concord, California, and grew up in the rural town of Ione, California.
His father, Peter Howard, Pete Brubeck, was a cattle rancher. His mother, Elizabeth, née Ivy, had studied piano in England under Myra Hess and intended to become a concert pianist. She taught piano for extra money. Brubeck did not intend to become a musician, although his 2 older brothers, Henry and Howard, were already on that track. Brubeck did, however, take lessons from his mother.
He could not read music during these early lessons, attributing the difficulty to poor eyesight, but faked his way through well enough that his deficiency went mostly unnoticed. Planning to work with his father on their ranch, Brubeck entered Liberal Arts College of the Pacific in Stockton, California, in 1938 to study veterinary science.
He switched his major to music at the urging of the head of zoology at the time, Dr. Arnold, who told him, "Brubeck, your mind's not here. It's across the lawn in the conservatory. Please go there. Stop wasting my time and yours." Later, Brubeck was nearly expelled when one of his music professors discovered that he was unable to sight read. Several others came forward to his defense, however, arguing that his ability to write counterpoint and harmony more than compensated and demonstrated his skill with music notation.
The college was still concerned, but agreed to allow Brubeck to graduate after he promised never to teach.
Military service. After graduating in 1942, Brubeck was drafted into the United States Army, serving in Europe in the Third Army under George S. Patton. He volunteered to play piano at a Red Cross show. The show was a resounding success, and Brubeck was spared from combat service.
He created one of the U.S. Armed Forces' first racially integrated bands, the Wolf Pack. In the military in 1944, Brubeck met Paul Desmond. After serving nearly 4 years in the Army, he returned to California for graduate study at Mills College in Oakland. He was a student of composer Darius Milhaud, who encouraged him to study fugue and orchestration, but not classical piano.
While on active duty, he had received 2 lessons from Arnold Schoenberg at UCLA in an attempt to connect with high modernist theory and practice. However, the encounter did not end on good terms, since Schoenberg believed that every note should be accounted for, an approach that Brubeck could not accept.
According to his son, Chris Brubeck, though, a 12-tone row is in The Light in the Wilderness, Dave Brubeck's first oratorio. In it, Jesus' 12 disciples are introduced, each singing his own individual notes. It is described as quite dramatic, especially when Judas starts singing "Repent" on a high and straining dissonant note. Jack Sheedy owned San Francisco-based Coronet Records, which had previously recorded area Dixieland bands. In 1949, Sheedy was convinced to make the first recording of Brubeck's octet and later his trio.
But Sheedy was unable to pay his bills, and in 1949 gave up his masters to his record stamping company, the Circle Record Company, owned by Max and Sol Weiss. The Weiss brothers soon changed the name of their business to Fantasy Records. The first Brubeck records sold well, and he made new records for Fantasy. Soon, the company was shipping 40,000 to 50,000 copies of Brubeck records each quarter, making a good profit.
Career. In 1951, Brubeck organized the Dave Brubeck Quartet with Paul Desmond on alto saxophone. The two took up residency at San Francisco's Black Hawk nightclub and had success touring college campuses, recording a series of live albums. The first of these live albums, Jazz at Oberlin, was recorded in March 1953 in the Finney Chapel at Oberlin College. Brubeck's live performance was credited with legitimizing the field of jazz music at Oberlin, and the album is one of the earliest examples of cool jazz.
Brubeck returned to College of the Pacific to record Jazz at the College of the Pacific in December of that year. Following the release of Jazz at the College of the Pacific, Brubeck signed with Fantasy Records, believing that he had a stake in the company. He worked as an artist and repertoire promoter for the label, encouraging the Weiss brothers to sign other contemporary jazz performers, including Jerry Mulligan, Chet Baker, and Red Norvo.
Upon discovering that the deal was for a half interest in his own recordings, Brubeck quit to sign with another label, Columbia Records.
college success. In June 1954, Brubeck released Jazz Goes to College with double bassist Bob Bates and drummer Joe Dodge. The album is a compilation of the quartet's visits to 3 colleges: Oberlin College, University of Michigan, and University of Cincinnati. It features 7 songs, 2 of which were written by Brubeck and Desmond. Balcony Rock, the opening song on the album, was noted for its timing and uneven tonalities, themes that would be explored by Brubeck later.
Brubeck was featured on the cover of Time in November 1954, the second jazz musician to be featured, following Louis Armstrong in February 1949. Brubeck personally found this acclaim embarrassing, since he considered Duke Ellington more deserving and was convinced that he had been favored as a white man.
In one encounter with Ellington, he knocked on the door of Brubeck's hotel room to show him the cover. Brubeck's response was, "It should have been you." Early bassists for the group included Ron Crotty, Bates, and Bates's brother Norman. Lloyd Davis and Dodge held the drum chair. In 1956, Brubeck hired drummer Joe Morello, who had been working with pianist Marion McPartland. Morello's presence made possible the rhythmic experiments that were to come.
In 1958, African-American bassist Eugene Wright joined for the group's Department of State tour of Europe and Asia. The group visited Poland, Turkey, India, Ceylon, Pakistan, Iran, and Iraq on behalf of the Department of State. They spent 2 weeks in Poland, giving 13 concerts and visiting with Polish musicians and citizens as part of the People to People program.
Wright became a permanent member in 1959, finishing the classic era of the quartet's personnel. During this time, Brubeck was strongly supportive of Wright's inclusion in the band and reportedly cancelled several concerts when club owners or hall managers objected to presenting an integrated band. He also cancelled a television appearance when he found out that the producers intended to keep Wright off camera.
In January 1960, he canceled a 25-date tour of colleges and universities in the American South because 22 of the schools refused to allow Wright to perform. Time out. In 1959, the Dave Brubeck Quartet recorded Time Out. The album, which featured pieces entirely written by members of the quartet, notably uses unusual time signatures, especially for jazz, about which Columbia Records was enthusiastic, but was nonetheless hesitant to release.
The release of Time Out required the cooperation of Columbia Records president Goddard Lieberson, who underwrote and released it on the condition that the quartet record a conventional album of the American South, Gone with the Wind, to cover the risk of Time Out becoming a commercial failure. Featuring the cover art of S. Neil Fujita, Time Out was released in December 1959 to negative critical reception.
Nonetheless, on the strength of these unusual time signatures, the album quickly went gold and was eventually certified double platinum and peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200. It was the first jazz album to sell more than 1 million copies. The single Take 5 from the album quickly became a jazz standard, despite its unusual composition and its time signature of 5/4.
On a handful of albums in the early 1960s, clarinetist Bill Smith replaced Desmond. These albums were devoted to Smith's compositions, thus had a somewhat different aesthetic than other Brubeck Quartet albums. Nonetheless, according to critic Ken Dryden, Smith proves himself very much in Desmond's league with his witty solos. Smith was an old friend of Brubeck's. They would record together intermittently from the 1940s until the final years of Brubeck's career.
In 1961, Brubeck and his wife Iola developed a jazz musical, The Real Ambassadors, based in part on experiences their colleagues and they had during foreign tours on behalf of the Department of State. The soundtrack album, which featured Louis Armstrong, Lambert, Hendrix and Ross, and Carmen McRae, was recorded in 1961. The musical was performed at the 1962 Monterey Jazz
Festival. At its peak in the early 1960s, the Brubeck Quartet was releasing as many as 4 albums a year. Apart from the College and the Time series, Brubeck recorded 4 LP records featuring his compositions based on the group's travels and the local music they encountered. Jazz Impressions of the USA, released in 1956 and marking Morello's debut with the group. Jazz Impressions of Eurasia, released in 1958. Jazz Impressions of Japan, released in 1964. And Jazz Impressions of New York, also released in 1964, are less well-known albums, but they produced Brubeck standards such as Summer Song, Brandenburg Gate, Kodo Song, and Theme from Mr. Broadway.
Brubeck wrote and the quartet performed the theme song for the Craig Stevens CBS drama series, Mr. Broadway. The music from the series became material for the New York album. In 1961, Brubeck appeared in a few scenes of the British jazz and beat film All Night Long, which starred Patrick McGoohan and Richard Attenborough.
Brubeck plays himself, with the film featuring close-ups of his piano fingerings. He performs It's a Raggy Waltz from the Time Further Out album and duets briefly with bassist Charles Mingus in Non-Sectarian Blues. Brubeck also served as the program director of WJZZ-FM, now known as WEZN-FM, while recording for the quartet.
He achieved his vision of an all-jazz format radio station, along with his friend and neighbour John E. Metz, one of the first African Americans in senior radio management. The final studio album for Columbia by the Desmond, Wright, Morello Quartet was Anything Goes, released in 1966, featuring the songs of Cole Porter. A few concert recordings followed, and the last time we saw Paris, released in 1967, was the classic quartet's swan song.
Later career, Brubeck produced The Gates of Justice in 1968, a cantata mixing biblical scripture with the words of Martin Luther King Jr. In 1971, the new senior management of Columbia Records decided not to renew Brubeck's contract, as they wished to focus on rock music.
He moved to Atlantic Records. Brubeck's music was used in the 1985 film Ordeal by Innocence. He also composed for and performed with his ensemble on the NASA Space Station, a 1988 episode of the CBS TV series This Is America, Charlie Brown.
Personal life. Brubeck founded the Brubeck Institute in 2000 with his wife Iola at their alma mater, the University of the Pacific. What began as a special archive consisting of the personal document collection of the Brubecks has since expanded to provide fellowships and educational opportunities in jazz for students. One of the main streets on which the school resides is named in his honor, Dave Brubeck Way.
In 2008, Brubeck became a supporter of the Jazz Foundation of America in its mission to save the homes and the lives of elderly jazz and blues musicians, including those who had survived Hurricane Katrina. Brubeck supported the Jazz Foundation by performing in its annual benefit concert, A Great Night in Harlem.
Dave Brubeck married jazz lyricist Iola Whitlock in September 1942. The couple were married for 70 years, until his death in 2012. Iola died at age 90 on March 12, 2014, from cancer in Wilton, Connecticut. Brubeck and Iola had 6 children, including a daughter, Catherine. 4 of their sons became professional musicians. The eldest, Darius, named after Brubeck's mentor Darius Milhaud, is a pianist, producer, educator, and performer.
Dan is a percussionist. Chris is a multi-instrumentalist and composer. Matthew, the youngest, is a cellist, with an extensive list of composing and performance credits. Another son, Michael, died in 2009. Brubeck's children often joined him in concerts and in the recording studio.
Religion. Brubeck became a Catholic in 1980, shortly after completing the Mass to Hope, which had been commissioned by Ed Murray, editor of the National Catholic Weekly Our Sunday Visitor. Although he had spiritual interests before that time, he said, "I didn't convert to Catholicism because I wasn't anything to convert from. I just joined the Catholic Church." Honors. In 1996, he received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2006, Brubeck was awarded the University of Notre Dame's Later Medal, the oldest and most prestigious honor given to American Catholics during the university's commencement. He performed Travelin' Blues for the graduating class of 2006. Death. Brubeck died of heart failure on December 5, 2012, in Norwalk, Connecticut, one day before his 92nd birthday. He was en route to a cardiology appointment, accompanied by his son Darius. A birthday party concert had been planned for him with family and famous guests. A memorial tribute was held in May 2013. Brubeck is interred at Umpqua Cemetery in Redding, Connecticut. Legacy. The Los Angeles Times noted that he was one of jazz's first pop stars, though he was not always happy with his fame. He felt uncomfortable, for example, that Time had featured him on the cover before it did so for Duke Ellington, saying, "It just bothered me."
The New York Times noted he had continued to play well into his old age, performing in 2011 and in 2010, only a month after getting a pacemaker. Times music writer Nate Chinan commented that Brubeck had replaced the old hammer and anvil attack with something almost airy, and that his playing at the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York City was the picture of judicious clarity. In the Daily Telegraph, music journalist Ivan Hewitt wrote that Brubeck did not have the notoriety of some jazz musicians who led tragic lives. He did not do drugs or drink.
What he had was endless curiosity combined with stubbornness. His work list is astonishing, including oratorios, musicals and concertos, as well as hundreds of jazz compositions. This quiet man of jazz was truly a marvel. In The Guardian, John Fordham said that Brubeck's real achievement was to blend European compositional ideas, very demanding rhythmic structures, jazz song forms, and improvisation in expressive and accessible ways.
His son Chris said, "When I hear chorale, it reminds me of the very best Aaron Copland, something like Appalachian Spring. There's a sort of American honesty to it." Robert Christgau dubbed Brubeck the jazz hero of the rock and roll generation. The Economist wrote that many found it hard to believe that the most successful jazz in America was being played by a family man, a laid-back Californian, modest, gentle, and open, who would happily have been a rancher all his days, except that he could not live without performing, because the rhythm of jazz, under all his extrapolation and exploration, was he had discovered the rhythm of his heart.
While on tour performing Hot House in Toronto, Chick Corea and Gary Burton completed a tribute to Brubeck on the day of his death. Corea played Strange Meadow Lark from Brubeck's album Time Out. In the United States, May 4th is informally observed as Dave Brubeck Day. In the format most commonly used in the United States, May 4th is written 5/4, recalling the time signature of Take 5, Brubeck's best-known recording.
In September 2019, musicologist Stephen A. Christ's book, Dave Brubeck's Time Out, provided the first scholarly book-length analysis of the seminal album. In addition to his musical analyses of each of the album's original compositions, Christ provides insight into Brubeck's career during a time he was rising to the top of the jazz chart.
Recognition. In 1975, the main belt asteroid 5079 Brubeck was named after Brubeck. Brubeck recorded 5 of the 7 tracks of his album, Jazz Goes to College in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He returned to Michigan many times, including a performance at Hill Auditorium, where he received a Distinguished Artist Award from the University of Michigan's Musical Society in 2006.
Brubeck was presented with a Benjamin Franklin Award for Public Diplomacy by United States Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice in 2008 for offering an American vision of hope, opportunity, and freedom through his music. At the ceremony, Brubeck played a brief recital for the audience at the State Department.
I want to thank all of you because this honor is something that I never expected. Now I'm going to play a cold piano with cold hands, Brubeck stated. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and First Lady Maria Shriver announced on May 28, 2008, that Brubeck would be inducted into the California Hall of Fame, located at the California Museum for History, Women, and the Arts. The induction ceremony occurred December 10th, and he was inducted alongside 11 other famous Californians.
On October 18, 2008, Brubeck received an honorary Doctor of Music degree from the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. Similarly, at the Monterey Jazz Festival in September 2009, Brubeck was awarded an honorary Doctor of Music degree from Berklee College of Music. On May 16, 2010, Brubeck was awarded an honorary Doctor of Music degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and the ceremony took place on the National Mall.
In September 2009, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts announced Brubeck as a Kennedy Center honoree for exhibiting excellence in performance arts. The Kennedy Center Honors Gala took place on December 6th, his 89th birthday, and was broadcast nationwide on CBS. When the award was made, President Barack Obama recalled a 1971 concert Brubeck had given in Honolulu and said, "You can't understand America without understanding jazz, and you can't understand jazz without understanding Dave Brubeck." On July 5, 2010, Brubeck was awarded the Miles Davis Award at the Montreal International Jazz Festival.
In 2010, Bruce Ricker and Clint Eastwood produced Dave Brubeck, in his own sweet way, a documentary about Brubeck for Turner Classic Movies to commemorate his 90th birthday. The Concord Boulevard Park in his hometown of Concord, California, was posthumously renamed Dave Brubeck Memorial Park in his honor. Mayor Dan Helix recalled one of his performances at the park, saying, "He will be with us forever because his music will never die."